Welcome back to another episode of Growth Marketers Podcast. I'm Samuel Timothy.
And I'm Taylor Rowe. Today's episode was manufacturing focused, and we dove into 7 growth challenges and hurdles that manufacturing companies are facing today and how we overcome them, right? We work with a lot of manufacturing companies to help them overcome these challenges on a daily basis. So we dove into a couple of tactics and tips that we preach to our clientele on how do we make that happen. So hopefully you guys will enjoy the episode. Please give us a like, subscribe, and let's jump right in. All right, Sam, we got a good one today. Let's dive right in terms of, what we're talking about today. Obviously, if you've listened to the podcast before, you know that at 1IMS, we work with a lot of manufacturing companies. And so this is another manufacturing focused podcast. We work with businesses that are thriving in the face of all the outside noise and challenges that manufacturing companies are facing right now. And we've also worked with companies that are really, really struggling. And so what we wanted to walk through today is some of the main challenges and hurdles that these manufacturing companies are facing. And we've identified really 7 major growth hurdles that manufacturers are facing today. And then we're going to walk you through how we can overcome them. So, Sam, walk us through the first growth hurdle, the first challenge that you see most commonly within manufacturing companies.
Yeah, I would say the first one is the shrinking Rolodex, which is something that we've seen probably hundreds of times where we had conversation with manufacturing CEOs and senior leadership who's coming to us and say, hey, my grandfather built his business on a Rolodex. We had a good book of business. We knew all the procurement managers and then design engineers at all these companies. But what we're commonly seeing right now is the people on these Rolodex either retired or expired. And they're being replaced by new recent grads from colleges that are coming into the place that don't necessarily have any prior relationship with any of the prior vendors, and they're going to market looking for new suppliers. So that shrinking Rolodex is a common challenge we're hearing as a hurdle.
Absolutely. I think more than any other industry that we've worked in, the manufacturing space is very relationship-based, relationship-driven. And it's not to say that that's going to change, but these relationships have been what we've seen is such long-standing relationships that exactly what you mentioned, the younger generation if it's a family-owned business, the younger generation is coming in, taking over, looking to shake things up, trying to evaluate their existing vendors, existing relationships. And they just don't have those deep-rooted relationships that they used to have. And, for a lot of companies, they've had a standard book of business that may actually be made up of a small number of clients, right? It may have 4 major clients that make up a majority of the revenue, and it's worked for them for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And things are, just starting to change. And because we've heavily relied on, well, these are our clients, they work with us for forever. They never really focused on building a sales engine, a marketing engine, anything that has been designed to generate customers. And so definitely a big problem of just that status quo of these are our customers, these are our relationships. You ask, who's your best salesperson, and say, okay, well, Bill's our best salesperson. Does he use a CRM? No, he just has, his network, his relationships. He travels around the country and meets with all these people. He has a lot of IP in terms of his knowledge about the business, about the product that is not easily transferable to that next person to take that role. And so we've seen a lot of businesses in jeopardy because of this model of managing those relationships and managing those customers.
Most certainly. I think the second biggest challenge we're hearing as far as a hurdle is there's no consistent flow of inbound leads. I think this is probably common across every industry, and it's more so in the manufacturing sector for sure, where they can for sure say that there's 5 leads going to be waiting in the inbox as I walk into the office every morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that goes hand in hand with the first point, right? Is, well, we've historically got all of our new business, or we just manage relationship with our existing business through our Rolodex, and now that things are changing, and so there is no inbound lead generation program. A lot of we've worked with 10, 20, $30 million companies, or even more that don't have a phone number on their website or don't have a form on their website, right? So not only do they not have a flow of inbound leads, even if someone wanted to reach out to them, it's very difficult to make that happen. So I think that's a great point. What's the third challenge that you see these companies facing?
No technology in place to streamline, automate, or optimize sales process and lead nurturing. This is crazy. You mentioned, multi-million-dollar companies, and we even had one company well past $1 billion in revenue with no CRM in place, and
Yep.
that they serve the largest three auto manufacturers, and they were supplying products to them. And they said, "Well, these are all our existing customers. We don't necessarily need to have a CRM." And I mean, sure enough, they don't need it because they have only three customers. But as a company that size don't have a CRM was kind of dumbfounding. And then obviously there's a lot more of those that we've seen as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, in the manufacturing space, every, without without a doubt, every company we work with, they believe they're the most unique company that's out there, right? And well, this is just not how our business works. That's how this manufacturing works. And there's some truth to the fact that it's a little less straightforward than some other B2B companies, right? In terms of the sales process, you have to sell through distribution channels. You have all these things that it may not be as straightforward of a process to have a CRM. And I also think that success, they say like sales cures all, right? I think success masks a lot of these problems, and they'll, we have, like you said, we've done $1 billion in revenue, or we've done $100 million in revenue, whatever the number is, without a CRM. So we don't need one. It doesn't mean that you couldn't have done, if you did 100 million, doesn't mean you couldn't have done 150 or 200 million, right? So like, yes, you've had success, but can we improve that? And I think the companies that are continuously looking for improvement and increase in efficiencies are the ones that are obviously winning over the long run. And I think implementing the right technologies is a huge piece of that. I think a lot of manufacturing companies understand that on the production side. They're building automation, they're investing into capital expenditures to make their operation run better, to have a competitive advantage. But for some reason on the sales marketing side, it's maybe a few years behind in understanding the value of that technology.
Most certainly.
All right, what's the next hurdle here, Sam?
So the other one is heavily relying on external contract sales reps or distribution partners to generate new business. I think that's been the tradition in the manufacturing sector that, hey, there's a lot of contract sales rep. I don't have to pay for their salary. They represent me and a few other guys that I do, that does the same thing, and they bring me business, and that's sufficient. Or, hey, we sell through distribution. It's their problem to go find customers and make sure that they're buying my parts or products.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of advantages to that model, right? And probably the biggest one is what you just described is, a field of commission only sales reps. So that makes a lot of sense, and it's very attractive. And it makes sense for those manufacturers reps or those distributors as well, because they can hold the relationships with these companies, and then they can sell multiple manufacturers products rather than just being, tied to supplier demand for one particular product. So the business model has made sense for a long time, but there's a lot of challenges that face the manufacturers themselves when it comes to controlling the narrative, controlling the actual consistency or projections of sales, because they're not the ones selling. They can't force these reps to do anything in terms of, we just talked about using a CRM. They can't control, necessarily what they're saying. I mean, they can give them sell sheets. They can invite them to trainings and webinars and, all these kind of things, in-person events, try to educate them as much as they can on their product. But it's hard to control a sales force that is not working directly for you, right? So I think the other thing to keep in mind is what we just talked about on the Rolodex, kind of shrinking, is yes, these people have these relationships now. Is that going to remain the same when a new person comes over, takes over that territory, whatever that may be? So it's not a bad thing, right? But I think there's a model where you can either sell directly. Obviously, the internet has changed a lot of things, where you don't necessarily need a bunch of outside sales reps for a lot of these companies. You can have inside sales reps that can, sit at a desk all day and do 5, 10, 20 times the amount of work, because they don't have that travel time. And I think you can control the sales a lot better by generating demand and bring those leads in through your own website, and then ultimately handing them off either to your internal sales reps or to your distributors. But it's definitely a big challenge for a lot of companies, because you certainly don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, right? And it's not an easy transition if you do want to start selling direct. We've seen a lot of companies break off a separate brand, so they're not selling it. They're basically becoming one of their own distributors, kind of private labeling it. We've seen companies, selling direct, but not, making sure they never undercut a distributor. So, I mean, there's definitely some nuance there to overcoming that particular challenge, but it is something that in terms of trying to focus on driving growth when you already have, distributed rep in every region that you're trying to be in. Well, what else can you really do to improve that, right? Well, you could focus on marketing so that your end customers are actually asking the manufacturer's rep for your brand specifically. You can, build your own sales force, or you could do some sort of a combination of the two.
Yeah, and I think a part of the reason why sometimes they even stayed away from using CRM and things like that is because they didn't have access to the end customers. They were selling through a distribution channel or through maybe like a manufacturer's rep, and they don't necessarily give them the full access to the customer, and that probably why they in the early days there was no need for a CRM, and they were able to still operate without that.
Yeah, and that idea of like a distribution network, a dealer network, I think is being challenged in a lot of different industries, right? It's when you talk about creating the best possible user experience, buying experience, it's hard to believe that buying experience is going to be, I want to buy this part or this whatever it is from this manufacturer, this machine. So I go to their website and find the information, and then when I go to call them, then they say, well, refer to this list of our distributors, and call one of them or call one of these dealers, find the dealer in the network near you, and then call them. So like, it's kind of a clunky sales process that I think, again, is probably going to be challenged depending on the company, the industry, and the reasons why they're using a distribution network, right? Is it simply for the sales process, right? Where you're just paying these people commission to basically sell, even though they were already on your website? Or is it true distribution? Like they have a warehouse with, your products in stock that's closer. So shipping costs, all this kind of thing. So I think there's still that, value added reseller, where people are bringing a lot of technical expertise to the table and doing customer service. Like there's value in that. But there's a lot of companies that, basically are, if you want to call it drop shipping, right? They're never touching the product. They're just selling it, and they're not even drumming up or generating the leads, right? Because the leads are coming directly from the manufacturer themselves. So that part I think is going to be challenged a lot. That scenario of I found the manufacturer's website, but now I have to go buy from somebody else, and that person never did anything in terms of marketing, sales. They're just ordering writing an invoice, writing a quote, and sending it over.
Most certainly. Yeah, I would say the next challenge is, trade shows and traditional sales and marketing model is becoming less effective. And I think it is kind of in line with some of the things that we've already shared. But I think, if anything that we learned from COVID and having to be working, remote and probably not even having access to an office, is the fact that you need to be able to reach your customers, not through the traditional mediums, but through some more innovative way of approaching that. So I think the trade shows and traditional sales and marketing models becoming less effective is definitely becoming
absolutely, and that for many of the manufacturing companies we work with, that has been their model, right? Is yes, we have these Rolodex, these are our customers, and then we try to pick up one or two customers per year from these 3 major trade shows that we go to, and also we have to go because all the major players are there, right? We hear that all the time. All the major players are there, all of our customers are there, so we kind of wine and dine. And it's just how the model has been. And again, it goes back to that status quo of are there other ways to generate customers? Is that really the best use of your time, your money, your budget, all those kind of things? So I agree that COVID, obviously put an end to those trade shows for at least a little while. And I think a lot of companies realized, hey, we're putting all our eggs in this basket, and also it's expensive basket, right? So we'll see how that changes over the next couple of years. But I think it's a great point that definitely recently has been a big hurdle for companies.
Yeah, I mean, most certainly, if you just take the total cost of exhibiting at a trade show divided by the number of business cards you collected, you'll quickly realize what is the cost per contact a trade show is. So
Sure.
that's certainly now very, very much a sustainable model. Yeah, I think the second to last is competitors are fears in capturing market share. This is anybody who's a forthcoming a forward thinking company. They're becoming fierce in their approach to acquiring customers. And some of these manufacturing companies, like you alluded to earlier, Taylor, if they're kind of status quo, hey, we just do the same thing over and over again, and just going to remain that way, those companies are the ones who are going to suffer when competition is extremely proactive in
Yeah, I
their
mean,
efforts to
obviously
capture
there's a
market
lot of
share.
constraints on manufacturing companies when it comes to production, right? In terms of their capacity, labor shortages, all these kind of things, right? And so the companies that are pushing the envelope and challenging the status quo in all areas are the ones that are succeeding. And like you said, competition is getting fierce for a lot of companies out there, and there's alternative ways to manufacture things now with additive manufacturing and 3D printing and all these kind of things. So everything is really changing, right? And I think the way that we operate as consumers, the way that we make purchase decisions as consumers is impacting the manufacturing space, and you have to do whatever you can to beat the competition and maintain that market share.
Most certainly. And the last but not least is private equities buying and merging companies. We're seeing that left and right. There's a lot of acquisition happening. We've seen that with many of our customers. I think it's just looking from the beginning of this year
Mm-hmm.
alone, there's probably been about 4 of our customers that were acquired. And those acquisition by those private equity companies, that wasn't just the only one that they bought. It's probably a family of companies they acquired within a span of such short time. Part of the reason why I think that is happening too is because many of these businesses are discount purchases because they're buying them for pennies on a dollar. Because oftentimes they have not done a good job in implementing infrastructure and whatever marketing initiatives and don't have a good way to operate profitability. They know, private equity knows, if they can come implement some of those things quickly and infuse some cash and automate some things, and they can get to
Yeah.
profitability very quickly and flip those and get out of it.
Yeah, and the
So
reality
they
is,
understand
it
they
takes
understand the value.
time and money to build a brand, to build a lead generation system, to address all of these problems that we just talked about. And a lot of manufacturing companies are so, their cash is all tied up in their infrastructure, right? In terms of their machinery, their buildings that they own, all their overhead in terms of labor, and so they, typically operate on relatively thin margins and don't have a lot of extra budget to throw into marketing or throw into building a sales force. And these private equity firms obviously do, right? They're putting a lot of money behind things. They have marketing teams, they have marketing agencies, and they're buying company, merging websites, building a brand, investing into everything related to digital in terms of marketing. And so, all of a sudden you're going to see a lot of these conglomerates of, this company owns, 10, 20, different manufacturing facilities, and they're building competitive advantages through acquisition. They're building customer lists through acquisition, and these small independent manufacturing companies are getting eaten up, and the ones that are trying to hold strong and do this on their own obviously are up against a Goliath in terms of budget.
Most certainly. Well, all of this has been kind of sounds like a bad news. So, what are some good news? How can manufacturing company leadership kind of change the game, right? Because I think at the end of the day, I'm sure none of the audience that listening here, haven't. They're all familiar with all these concerns, right? They already understand some of these problems. So, what
Sure.
could they
So what
proactively
we try
do
to
to make
do
sure
for our
that they are
clients
setting
is,
themselves up for
of course,
success?
focus on the short term and see what we can do. What are some quick wins that we can generate some business, really to start paying for our marketing initiatives, right? If you look at your initial goal from a marketing perspective, is like, how many clients does it take to break even? And then can we start investing some of those funds into marketing, right? Because if that's the question is, we can't afford marketing. Well, how do we make it so that we can afford it, right? How many customers do we need to pay for these initiatives? And really the second piece is like, how do we future proof our strategy? How do we get into a scenario where we're not struggling for new business? We're not relying on Rolodex. We're not relying on our distribution network to bring deals and bring customers to us. And so what we do to future proof our strategy for our clients is really 3 things, right? So the first being invest in technology. All of these outside variables that we kind of touched upon, all the challenges that they're facing, those 7 hurdles that you just outlined. Investing in the right technology allows us to do really a lot of things, but 2 major things. One, it allows us to increase our visibility, and when we're concerned about where our marketing dollars are going, understanding and having that line of sight into ROI, into where our leads are coming from, into what deals are in the pipeline, into our cost of acquisition, understanding sales velocity, understanding profitability in regards to which leads are the most valuable to us, both short term and long term. All of that visibility allows us to make more informed, data-driven decisions, right? The other thing that it allows us to do is increase our capacity by providing some efficiencies, right? So technology allows us to build automation, allows us to quickly create reports, that allows us to quickly look at dashboards and analytics and all these sorts of things, where if we can, as we talked about earlier, if we can build automation, if we can have, let's say a CRM, our marketing automation system that allows one inside sales rep to do the, work of, 5 outside sales reps, that increases our efficiency, that increases our capacity, right? If each sales rep can handle 50% more leads because we're able to prioritize leads, we're able to build automation, we're able to automate or streamline the quoting process, whatever is a hurdle in terms of time, just like you would say on your production floor, right? They say like footsteps are the most expensive sound in a production floor, right? Because you want to be as efficient as possible. Same thing when it comes to sales and marketing. Traditionally, it's been, old school kind of boys club of, we spend a lot of time and energy whining and dining and traveling around the country. And I think there's definitely a new way to do that. And I think technology can be the first place that we start in providing answers to both of those. Again, visibility as well as increasing efficiencies and capacity.
Most certainly. And I think, some of the things that you've mentioned,
Well,
like
and
you
there's
can still
in-person
do
ways,
wine
right?
and dine.
So
There's
again,
digital way of
increasing that
doing those
visibility
things as
allows us
well,
to
right?
look
Like
at
there's
who our best customers are. How do we go get more of those best customers? And then when you prioritize those leads, those are the people you spend your time with, right? We worked with manufacturing companies who, when we boiled it down, they were spending like 80% of their engineering research was on, or in engineering resources was done with or spent on R&D for projects that they were just quoting, right? So they're spending a lot of time on customers that these projects or these products never actually went to production. And so you're just wasting time on the wrong people, right? And without the right visibility into who these customers are, what our statistics are on our close rates, you're not going to be able to make those type of decisions.
most certainly. And I think, at the end of the day, efficiencies across the board is the best way to create profitability as well, right? Whether it be for sales, marketing, or operations. If you can gain efficiency and, like you said, the visibility, absolutely, that helps.
So the second piece, right, when we talk
profit.
about how do we future-proof ourselves, how do we overcome these challenges, the second item we want to talk about is building your digital infrastructure and investing in your digital infrastructure. And the way that we look at this is a little bit different. Technology is certainly a piece of that. I know we said that was the first thing, is invest in technology. But what we're really talking about is your digital assets, your website, your digital properties, your social media profiles, anything that you own in terms of your digital presence. What we want to become is a resource center for our clients, right? If we can turn our website into essentially the Wikipedia for our industry, right? We want to be the go-to place, our website, our web property, YouTube channel. If your potential customer has a question about anything related to your industry, your product, we want two things to happen. One, we want them to think of us, and we want them to go to our website or go to our digital properties and learn from us, right? We want to be the ones controlling the narrative, educating our prospect. And that does, again, accomplishes both the short term and the long term. We want to do this so that, over time we become that go-to place, which requires us to spend time investing into our digital infrastructure in terms of our content, our website, transforming the way that we're educating our buyers and ultimately our distributors as well, if that's a piece of it.
Yeah, most certainly. And there's a lot more ways. I mean, we talked a little bit about gaining efficiency. If you use, build a digital infrastructure that helps your salespeople do their job better, as well as your prospect find the information that they want easier, that gains a tremendous amount of momentum for organizations. I think there are technology that's available that right now allows you to do demos of your product through virtual 3D rendering and virtual reality and all sorts of things like that, that actually helps explain your product, your process, your quality standards, all of those things much more efficiently. And obviously, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And if you're using 3D and virtual reality, that's even better, right? So infrastructure like that actually adds a lot of value to your organization as a whole. It makes the life of the prospect a lot easier as well, for them to be able to choose.
And the third point that we wanted
right
to talk about is building what we refer to as brand affinity, right? And so what this means is we want your customers to have a preference to work with you or to buy from you or to use your products or services, that you're providing, right? And so how do we do that? Well, we have to, again, become that thought leader in the space. We have to become that informational resource. And what happens is, over time, people will, rather than, let's say, go to Google and search for, whatever type of manufacturing company, we want everyone in our market to know and understand who we are and have a preference to work with us, so that they go directly to our website, right? Or they call directly our company or our distribution network, whatever that is. But that allows us to have faster, we talked about sales velocity, shorter sales cycles, because basically they're already sold, right? They know that they want to work with us, right? They also will be willing to pay more, or if we have issues with our turnaround time or production, they're willing to wait a little bit longer because they know that it's a higher quality. They know that they want to work with us, right? And you see this happen on the consumer side all the time. And you look at what Apple has done and the way that people that they just buy the new iPhone when it comes out, buy the new MacBook, they'll go to the Apple store and wait in line to get it fixed or whatever that would be, because they expect a certain quality when it comes to Apple. They just have an affinity, and it's complete. Really, in that scenario, it's a complete emotional attachment to Apple. There's no real logical way that you could justify paying $1,500 for a phone when if you sign up with AT&T or whatever, they'll give you a Samsung phone for free, right? I mean, there's no real logic behind it, except for people have a cult-like following towards Apple. And that's an extreme use case or extreme scenario, but you see it in the business world as well. And, back in the day, not too long ago, there was, the idea of like, no one ever got fired for hiring IBM, right? And that's kind of the idea that you want to build in your industry is, the gold standard is X, Y, and Z company, right? And so that's the safe bet. If you have to go through an RFP process, we want to always be on that list of like, yeah, we'll look at these other companies, but we also have to throw company A in the mix. That's really all we're asking for as marketers. Like, can we create more opportunities for our sales reps and for our company to win bids? And how we do that is, again, we want everyone in our market to know, understand who we are, and we want to be associated with top tier quality or top tier service.
Yeah, and the big difference between having a brand equity and just being just a regular vendor is, if you think about how some of the ways that manufacturing companies have gotten customers in the past is through getting listed on a list like Thomas Net, where someone could just go fill out a form or just go search for, injection molding company in Chicago, found 17 of them, fill out all of their forms, and then you get, quotes back, and you just compare prices and you see, one guy is 17 cents cheaper per unit than the other guy. Well, I'm going to go with the guy that's 17 cents cheaper. Right. So the decision-making process and criteria has nothing to do with the brand. There's no relationship. There's no affinity. There's no trust built, right? And it's completely a price war decision. But once you do some of these things that we've just described, you built an infrastructure and digital infrastructure. You have technology that give you efficiency and visibility, and you are building on all of these things to educate your markets and create visibility for your organization. People are going to come to you and looking for you specifically and want your support and your help. Then if they are asking you for expertise and your quotes and things of that nature, then that decision has nothing to do with what other alternative options that they may have. And it increases your odds of winning those deals.
Couldn't
and
agree
it
more.
also increases your profitability.
And that's the exact scenario of how that typically works, right? If there's no go-to player in the space, you're just a line item on a list of potential vendors, and it comes down to cost per piece, or really a lot of times it comes down to cost, speed, those kind of things. And the only way to combat that is to have people to have that affinity to want to work with your brand. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the podcast. Hopefully you guys learned something, took something away from this. If you did, please subscribe, share with a friend or a colleague. Anything helps. If you have questions or topics that you want us to cover in the future, please send us a message, send us an email, comment on this video if you're watching on YouTube. Or like I said, send us a question on our website, and we'll be happy to cover those topics. Tune in next week for another episode.
Growth Marketers is brought to you by One IMS, helping you reach new heights through integrated marketing. One world, one web, one IMS.